Chapter 19. Into the Light. Declan stared down at the simple silver disc that Raelif had handed him. It was an Adiva, and, according to the elf, it would protect him from the sun. So long as you always, and I mean always, keep this on you in daylight, you will be immune from the sun's harmful effects. Raelif had whispered fiercely, "Take it off, and what happened yesterday when you were in the light will seem like a walk in the park in comparison. Understand?" "I do." "I really hope you do, Declan, if that's your actual name." Raelif huffed the last part. "What are you talking about?" Declan's forehead furrowed. "Of course that's my real name." Raelif studied his face. "I believe you believe that, but it doesn't make any sense whatsoever realistically. And your ignorance or innocence or whatever is wrong with you makes you more of a threat than... Just remember what I've said. Don't take the Adiva off when you're in daylight. Actually, don't take it off at all. Not even when you bathe or have sex. I don't... Bathe? I certainly hope you do." Raelif's eyebrows waggled, showing that momentary lack of seriousness that he portrayed most of the time as his primary quality. "But it's not. He is not what he seems." "No, I mean, yes, I bathe, and I do not..." Declan shook his head in aggravation. He was only explaining this to Raelif because he was Aquilyn's best friend, and he didn't want Raelif to give Aquilyn the impression that he had someone. And yet, that was foolish, the height of foolishness. Yet he kept on trying to make words work for him, but they remained his natural enemy. "I mean that I have no one that I would... Forget it, it doesn't matter." Raelif's lips pursed and his eyes narrowed. "Ah, yes, about that. It really isn't wise that you involve yourself more with the king." Declan blinked. "Excuse me?" "Drawing attention to yourself is the last thing that you should be doing, especially when you don't even seem to know what you should be keeping hidden," Raelif stated, "and drawing Aquilyn's eye would bring way too much attention." "I'm no danger to the king," Declan hissed. "No, of course you aren't. But the position of the king's best friend is already taken." Raelif narrowed his eyes at Declan. "Is best friend supposed to be a euphemism for something else?" Declan's voice dropped into an Arctic zone. He hadn't meant to do that. "He's mine," the voice in his head whispered. "Mine, mine, mine!" "What? No! Aquilyn and I, well, he is exquisite, but no, most certainly not." Raelif shook his head. "I mean, you should not think of him at all, romantically or otherwise." "Why?" Declan's voice was a low growl. "Because anything other than a best friend would be short-term. He's a king and you're... Well, we don't know what you are or who you are, but we know what you aren't. And that's consort material," Raelif pointed out. Declan jerked back as if hit. Of course, Raelif was right about this. He was a bartender. Aquilyn was a king. He was human, supposedly. Aquilyn was an Arve. He was mortal. Aquilyn was immortal. They could not be farther apart if they tried to be. A relationship of any real kind could never happen between them. And Declan? Declan didn't do casual, even if Aquilyn was willing to engage in. Here, his cheeks flooded with color and heat built between his legs. He was imagining what he'd caught many sun elves doing in the back room at the dawn. Aquilyn might not be adverse to a quick tumble, but anything further? No, it was impossible. But the Sun King was the first, and only, person he'd ever wanted to do something with. His face, his body, his laugh, his smile, his goodness. All of it called to Declan like a siren song. But then again, didn't sirens lead sailors to their deaths? "And really, is it worth risking your life for something fleeting?" Raelif continued. Declan blinked. My life. He had been thinking of his heart, but his life? Those that live under the sun don't take kindly to those who can't, Raelif said, or at least need assistance to do so. That means you, if you didn't pick up on my earlier meaning. Declan felt something curdle within him. It was as he had told Finley. The Arave would never accept him if they knew of his sun sensitivity. The Sun King would reject him too. In fact, Aquilin might be repulsed by him. The memory of the Sun King's bright smile while they'd both been under the bed at the dawn flashed before his mind's eye. He imagined that smile dying, and those blue eyes, which had been crinkled with laughter, growing wide with horror instead. He pictured Aquilin pushing himself away from him, scuttling to the far wall, his hands limbing with protecting magic. "Who are you?" he imagined the Sun King whispering. "What are you?" And his honest answer? "I don't know." "Oh, for goodness sake, do not look as if I killed your puppy," Raelif snarled. "I'm just telling you the truth. The truth is not personal, or at least, I'm not trying to be cruel to you. I'm just giving you advice. Good and proper advice. Advice that will save your life." Declan just stared at him, glowering, hurting. Raelif was helping him, but he was also hurting him. He was saying, in essence, all these things you fear about yourself, they're true. He wanted to pull denial around him like a blanket, curl underneath it, hide. But then something occurred to him, something basic, something profound. "Do you need an Adiva too? Is that why you know so much about them?" Declan asked. "Me?" Raelif gave him a broad smile. "I am as Arave can be. The sun loves me. Look at my dark golden skin." He gestured to his left forearm that was the color of well-done toast. "Compare that to you, pale as a fish belly." "That has nothing to do with why I get sick." "No, it doesn't. The color of one's skin, or hair, or eyes doesn't say anything about them. Not really. Now remember, keep the Adiva on at all times." Raelif flashed a tight smile as he turned to go. Declan grabbed his arm to keep him there. He wasn't done asking questions. "But why are you giving me this? Why are you helping me at all?" "Because I am a fool," Raelif laughed, and then he'd shaken loose of Declan's restraining hand and moved away. Even if the sun hadn't been out, Declan wouldn't have followed after Raelif, because he'd heard Finley and Gemma out in the hallway with the Arave. But that meant he hadn't been able to demand more answers, maybe even answers to questions he had not dared ask yet, such as how did Raelif know so much about his weakness to sunlight and the solution to it? And since this Adiva had a name, not to mention the fact that it existed at all, did that mean other people had a similar weakness? Who were these people? And was he one of them? But instead, he'd quickly shut the door to his bedroom and locked it. His room was bathed in a velvety darkness. He had taped the edges of his blinds shut so that no light could peek in around the edges of the windows. He even put a towel along the bottom of the door so that light wouldn't leak in from the hallway. He kicked that into place. He had a single candle sitting on the nightstand by his bed, but it was not lit, yet he could see perfectly. He'd not noticed this before. At least he'd not consciously thought about just how keen his vision actually was. "I can see in the dark. Humans can't do that. Not like this. The sun hurts me. Humans aren't harmed by the sun as quickly or as much as I am. I'm able to kill Leviathan. Humans can't kill Leviathan because they have no magic. I'm vaster than a human. I'm stronger than a human." So the inevitable conclusion of all of that was, I'm not human. No, I I have to be human. He started to pace his bedroom. It was 15 feet wide and 10 feet long, a comfortable space with a queen-sized bed piled with a light-as-air comforter and plenty of squashy pillows. There was a desk and chair, along with a large walk-in closet and ensuite bath. The RV liked to be exquisitely clean, so bathrooms were more decked out than they had been before the war. There were oceans of hot and cold running water, a gorgeous shower with multiple spray heads. Every toilet had a bidet function with a heated seat. Everything was powered by the use of power stones. They were set into slots on the outside of the home. One would power a whole home with no pollution and no mess, and it only had to be re-energized once a year. The light that they generated didn't hurt him either, but he still preferred the darkness. But why? That's not normal. For a moment, his mind offered him a memory of a cheerless, cold bedroom, one with a pile of straw for a mattress and a blanket so thin as to be almost see-through to cover himself with. Rats, or things that had looked like rats but bigger and meaner, had often leaped over his sleeping form, and if he had not been careful, they would take a bite out of him. And all around had been darkness, so much darkness that it almost had heft. What memory is this? My bedroom with my adopted parents was not quite as nice as this, but it was no hovel like I'm imagining. Nothing like that. The dark, rage-filled face of Volray Voltoris filled his mind's eye. The black keep within the dark, shrouded cavern came after that image. That was my bedroom there, in the Venom Thorn, under Volray's tutelage. While none of the students lived in luxury, my room was far worse than even the lowest servants. Not that Lady Ashrin knew. Volray made me lie to her, made me pretend that I had a bed with the other students in the dormitory. But no, I was locked in the tower. This knowledge flowed through him. It was as true and certain as anything else he knew, but it was madness, a nightmare, not real. Yet was he sure? He stopped pacing and covered his face with his hands. What was wrong with him? Why was he like this? Who am I? What am I? The coolness of the Adiva pressed against his forehead. The chain drifted against his cheek. He brought his hands down and looked at the delicate silver disc. It was unmarked, so if he had expected some spell to be written in Katir upon it, there was none. The links of the chain it was on were delicate, but they did not look magical. Could this really protect me from the sun? Although why would there be any spells that the Arve knew that would protect people from the sun? They loved the sun. They drew their power from the sun. Perhaps this isn't an Arve spell. Maybe Adivas aren't Arve objects. Adiva is not a Katir word. If not Arve, then what kind of amulet is this, and how does Raylif know about them? The Night Prince is a book series, audiobook series, and weekly podcast now, but it started in 2023 as simply a written serial story on my own subscription website, wraithbrain.com. This is how everything starts. First, I pitched the general idea to my members, like what if humans and high fantasy beings like elves and fairies had to exist together on our Earth after a catastrophe? Then I write and post chapters directly for my private members. They get to read everything as soon as I write it, and they also get to tell me exactly what they think. There's a comment section at the end of every single chapter. When I get about 50 chapters into the story, I know much more about the characters, world, and storyline. This lets me go back to the beginning and revise those early chapters to reflect what's going to happen later. You know, foreshadowing, red herrings, and all those author tricks. Only then will I consider putting it out as books, audiobooks, and releasing it to the general public. In general, members are 50 chapters or more ahead of the public podcast. In this case, members are almost 100 chapters ahead in the written story and more than 80 chapters ahead in the audio story. You can, of course, wait every week for the next episode, but you can also join my subscription for a month and get all the available chapters of The Night Prince right now. I'll post a link in the notes. Yet more questions for the enigmatic elf. But from what he'd heard, Raelif, Gemma, and Finley had headed to Hope, the separatist city, so there was no chance for him to ask more questions unless he followed them. But it was nearly 11 in the morning now. The sun would be reaching its zenith soon. The thought of walking all the way to Hope, miles away, under the blazing noonday light seemed impossible. It was impossible. He hadn't even been able to survive the walk from the dawn to the sewer. Would this Adiva really protect him against that amount of light? He needed to test it in a far more controlled arena. His heart was thudding heavily in his chest as he turned and went to the door of his bedroom. Should he put the Adiva on now, before he even tried to enter the hallway? There wasn't that much light in there, not direct anyway. He'd want to see what the Adiva could do in full sunlight. He slowly put the Adiva over his neck. He felt nothing. No tingling, no magical shield appeared, nothing. Is this thing even real? But Raelif might have seemed many things, but a fool was not one of them. If he said this would protect Declan from the sun, then it would. Besides, what did Declan know of how a magical amulet would work? Maybe there wasn't any tingling involved, just so long as it did work. That was all that mattered. He was only wearing a light pair of black drawstring pants, no shirt or shoes. He couldn't imagine going out like this, unprotected, so much bare skin exposed. He could imagine the acidic feel of sunlight on his ribs. And yet, if the Adiva worked, then he could have gone outside naked and been fine. Still, he grabbed his long-sleeved black hoodie that was hanging over the back of his desk chair before he went to the door of his bedroom. His fingers hesitated on the lock. It was cool beneath his fingers, cool and smooth. He flicked it open and then turned the door handle. The door swung outwards, and his eyes watered even at the low light in the hallway. The Adiva hung so lightly around his neck that he barely sensed it was there. He threw on his jacket, zipped it up to his neck, tugged down the sleeves so that they hung over his hands, and pulled up the hood. Now or never. He stepped out into the hallway. There was only a single window at the end of the hallway, but that window faced west, so no direct sunlight made its way into the hallway this early in the day, just reflected light. He could see the deep green of the side garden out there. Even without the careful tending that Michael offered, the garden plants bloomed in wild abundance since the Arave's arrival. The scent of them was intoxicating, sun-warmed and full to bursting with life. He imagined that to stuff his nose in such a flower at full noon would be what it was like to draw his nostrils along Aquiline's neck. He shook himself. He needed to focus. He slid out into the hallway and stuck to the more shadowy parts of it. He kept his hood pulled as far forward as he could. The sleeves of his jacket extended below his fingertips. He padded silently down the hallway past Finley's bedroom and stopped only when he reached the central circular foyer. The house was laid out in 3 wings that jutted out from this central point. One wing, the wing he just left, held his and Finley's bedrooms. The second wing was where Michael and Shonda's master suite was located, and also where Gemma's sun-filled bedroom was. The third was a living wing with the kitchen, family room, 2 offices for Shonda and Michael, and a dining room. There was a gorgeous outdoor patio where they ate during the spring, summer, and even early fall months. He'd not been out there during the day since, well, for a long while. That's where he should go now. The thought of stepping out onto the patio near noon had cold sweat coating his upper lip and his hands twitching inside his sleeves. The doors to the patio were just to his right from the circular foyer, but even the foyer was filled with light.
I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to.
His heart was in his throat. His breathing was rapid and rushed as he dashed through the foyer to the shadows with the French doors to the patio. There was just a segment of shadow there. A slice, really. Hardly enough for him to fit into. His back was pressed tightly against the wall. His arms were clutched against his chest, and his feet were tucked together into the corner. Still, he felt the warmth of the sun on the hood of his jacket and sleeves.
I'm supposed to go into the light, yet I'm clinging to the darkness, and it's hardly dark.
More cold sweat coated his upper lip. His breathing was short and sharp. It was only then that he heard Shonda and Michael's voices coming from outside that he unbent a little. The two of them were likely sitting on the patio under the umbrella having breakfast. Michael always brought Shonda tea and toast with butter and jam. They would drink and eat together while welcoming the day. This was far later than they usually started their morning, but they'd all been out quite late.
What would happen if I go out there and the light takes me again?
If that happened, at least they would be able to help him inside. Michael had seen what had happened to him yesterday. He could carry Declan to the safety of the shadows. So that would be better than if he'd done this alone. But they'd have so many more questions if they saw him fall again. But better those than to perish in the light.
If the Adiva doesn't work.
He closed his hand around the cool disc. Again, he felt nothing from it. It seemed only like a normal necklace, not something that could stand between him and the power of the sun.
Is it really worth risking this at all? I could just keep to the shadows, go out only under the light of the moon and stars. It's what I love most in any case. The night is mine. It always has been.
But then, for a moment, he saw Aquilyn's face in his mind's eye, the glorious fall of honey-colored hair, the blue eyes that were as deep and vast as the ocean, the creamy skin tinged with gold. For a moment, he imagined Aquilyn laying back on a divan under a flower-covered bower. His chest was bare. His limbs were loose and languid. Sunlight, golden and liquid, poured down upon him. He extended a hand to Declan.
Come, he mouthed. Come.
It seemed he said another name, not Declan, but the name was lost. The Sun King's eyes were heavy-lidded, his crimson and white robes parted over his spread thighs. Just a slight movement more and they would hide nothing.
Come to me,
Aquilyn's voice whispered.
I cannot ever get to him if I stay in the dark, and he is mine, mine.
And it was that thought, the thought of the Sun King, that had Declan turning and going into the light. He grasped the handles of the patio doors and threw them open. He stepped out into full sunlight and thrust back his hood so that the sun hit him full in the face.
I do this for you. For you.
Sunlight flooded him. It was so bright. He could only see gold. You're here, Aquilyn whispered in the wind. Declan? Declan, are you all right? It was Shonda's voice that reached him. A real voice, not imagined, not wished for, not whatever that had been. He blinked and slowly his vision returned. Shonda and Michael were seated at the outside wooden table. Shonda wore an emerald green silk robe over white cotton pajamas. Michael was in dark blue silk pajama pants and matching robe. There was a pot of tea on the table and 2 mugs. Half a dozen slices of toast, sweet cream butter, and sweeter strawberry jam were also set out. They were both staring at him with wide eyes. He could imagine the picture he made. His arms outstretched, his head thrown back, his lips parted.
Declan.
Michael suddenly roused himself from his shock and came towards Declan with raised hands.
The sun, you shouldn't. I'm fine,
Declan said. The sunlight was full on him. His head was exposed to it. He pushed up the sleeves of his jacket to his elbows. He turned his right arm back and forth, watching as the sunlight played over his skin. There was no pain. There was no sense of queasiness. There was no weakness. Just pleasant warmth. In fact, he was starting to sweat in his jacket. "I'm fine," Declan repeated, not quite sure he believed it. "I can come to you," he murmured in his mind. And it was then that he realized the Adiva was still cool against his skin. It wasn't electricity, but cold that represented the magic. He remembered feeling cold inside of him when he fought Volray.
When? I mean, if. You don't feel ill?
Michael asked as he put a hand on Declan's left shoulder.
No, I'm quite well.
Declan stared around the garden.
I've not seen this in daylight.
Shonda shifted around and looked at the garden that was filled with blooms. There were stone paths that curled their way around the flower beds. The vibrancy of the colors was almost overwhelming. Reds, purples, yellows, oranges. He blinked and looked away. While the sun wasn't overcoming him, his senses were. The sunlit world was still very bright and almost raucous. "Come sit down, Declan. Have some tea and toast with us," Shonda said. Michael guided Declan to the table. Declan sat down, and immediately the umbrella blocked out the sunlight. The chill of the Adiva grew less. He let out a relieved breath. He doubted he would ever really like sunlight. As Shonda poured him a cup of tea, and both of his parents, for they were his parents, as much as those who had birthed him were, and his adopted parents had been, spoke gently to him, lovingly to him. Declan wondered, what human doesn't like sunlight? He knew the answer to that. Every human likes sunlight. They needed sunlight to live and be healthy. The sun represented hope and the possibilities of new beginnings to them. A brand new day. But the sun was his enemy, and the Adiva was his armor against it. For he was not human.
While it's been obvious to all of us that Declan isn't human, the books are called The Night Prince. When I put myself in his head, I knew it wouldn't be an easy thing for him to admit to himself, if it would even come up as a possibility. Before the Leviathan and the high fantasy beings arrived, Declan didn't even know he could be something other than human. So yeah, he was different. He was considered strange. He felt alien, like me. What I talked about before, he did not have the manual for how to behave, but that is not out of the realm of being human. It's just, in a way, it is the essence of being human. And then when other species came, he's not like any of them either. So though they are now neighbors and friends, dwarves, fairies, orcs, goblins, elves, all of it, he doesn't see himself in any of them either. So he's still stuck with he's a very weird human, or he's something he hasn't encountered yet. And this led me to wonder, as it always does, what would it be like to discover you're not human? Put yourself in Declan's shoes. Part of me would absolutely love it, because it would be like, there's the explanation for why I'm not like everyone else. But it would be strange and alienating at the same time, because there's the way that you've thought of yourself this entire time, and now there's the reality of it. And I think it would be a little destabilizing, like you didn't know yourself at all, and you still don't. And the person that you think you are is in fact an illusion. So, what do you think it would feel like if you were to find out that you weren't human?